Football is just one day away, and we are here to continue doing the NFL schedule predictions for every single NFL team. Today we will be doing the NFC North division, starting with the Detroit Lions. So week one, they go to Kansas City to start it off. Tough matchup against Patrick Mahomes. The Super Bowl champions are going to get their rings, and they're going to get a win against the Detroit Lions. I have them losing that game to the Kansas City Chiefs. Then they return home, and they lose to the Seattle Seahawks. They win against the Atlanta Falcons. They lose to the Green Bay Packers. They win against the Carolina Panthers. They lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They win against the Baltimore Ravens. Then they win against the Las Vegas Raiders. Then they go on a bye week. Then they come off the bye week and beat the Los Angeles Chargers. Then they beat the Chicago Bears. They beat the Green Bay Packers. They lose to the New Orleans Saints. They beat the Chicago Bears. Then they beat the Denver Broncos. They lose to the Minnesota Vikings, and then they lose to the Dallas Cowboys. And then week 18, they finish it off with a win against the Minnesota Vikings, which will give them a 10-7 record for the Detroit Lions. Next team will be the Minnesota Vikings. So week one, they have a home game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm going to have them win that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Then they lose to the Philadelphia Eagles. Then they win against the Los Angeles Chargers. Then they lose to the Carolina Panthers. Then they lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. They win against the Chicago Bears. They win against the 49ers. They lose to the Green Bay Packers. They lose to the Atlanta Falcons. They win against the New Orleans Saints. They lose to the Denver Broncos. They win against the Chicago Bears. Then they go on a bye week. Then they come off the bye week and lose to the Las Vegas Raiders. They lose to the Cincinnati Bengals. Then they win against the Detroit Lions. They win against the Green Bay Packers, and then they lose to the Detroit Lions, which will give them an 8-9 record for the Minnesota Vikings. So they're probably not going to make the playoffs with an 8-9 record. All right, next team will be the Green Bay Packers. So week one, they have a date against the Chicago Bears, and I'm going to have them win that game. They always win against the Chicago Bears. Then they lose to the Atlanta Falcons. Then they win against the New Orleans Saints. They win against the Detroit Lions. Then they lose to the Las Vegas Raiders. Then they go on a bye week. Then they come off the bye week and lose to the Denver Broncos. They win against the Minnesota Vikings. Then they win against the LA Rams. They lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then they lose to the Los Angeles Chargers. They lose to the Detroit Lions. And then they lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. They lose to the New York Giants. Then they win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They win against the Carolina Panthers. They lose to the Minnesota Vikings, and then they win against the Chicago Bears, which will give them an 8-9 record for the Green Bay Packers. And the final team to do is the Chicago Bears. So week one, they lose to the Green Bay Packers. They lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. Then they lose to the Denver Broncos. They lose to the Washington Commanders. They lose to the Minnesota Vikings. They lose to the Las Vegas Raiders. They lose to the Los Angeles Chargers. They lose to the New Orleans Saints. They win against the Carolina Panthers. They lose to the Detroit Lions. Then they lose to the Minnesota Vikings. Then they go on a bye week. They come off the bye week and lose to the Detroit Lions. They lose to the Cleveland Browns. They lose to the Arizona Cardinals. Then they win against the Atlanta Falcons. And then they lose to the Green Bay Packers, which will give them a 2-15 record for the Chicago Bears. Yep, the Chicago Bears will go 2-15 in my opinion. And that'll end it for this division. And the recap, first place is the Detroit Lions with a 10-7 record. In second place, we have the Green Bay Packers with an 8-9 record. In third place, we have the Minnesota Vikings with an 8-9 record as well. And in fourth place, finishing off the division, is the Chicago Bears with a 2-15 record to finish off the NFC North. So there you guys have it, the NFC North predictions. I will be back tomorrow to do the NFC South, and then on Friday we will do the NFL playoffs predictions. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.